in this video, now that you know how to factor, we're going to solve quadratic equations through factoring. If we can't factor them, we will then use the quadratic formula. I'll refresh your memory on what the quadratic formula is and how it works. But hopefully after we solve some with factoring, you'll feel a little bit more comfortable doing it that way, and you won't have to go to that quadratic formula. Please keep in mind, we are solving quadratic equations. Equations, it's set equal to something. When we solve them, it has to be set equal to 0. If it's not set equal to 0, you have to set it equal to 0. Subtract whatever it was that's over there. Expand things out, whatever the case is. But if you are going to solve by factoring, it has to be set equal to 0. So that's first and foremost your most important piece. So we are going to solve the following quadratic equation by factoring. So I've given you a nice simple one, leading coefficients 1, so we can shortcut this. Still go through the product and sum piece. Product is 12, sum is 7. The two numbers that work are 4 and 3. When the leading coefficient is 1, you should be super, super quick with these. If it's not 1, then you have to physically go through and split the middle term. So because of this, I now have my factors, x plus 4, x plus 3. So I factored the left-hand side, and it's set equal to 0, which is the goal. Now that it's set equal to 0, since these are factors, it's a product. Something times something has to equal 0, means one of those two somethings has to be 0, or however many things are being multiplied together. Therefore, I know x plus 4 has to equal 0, or x plus 3 has to equal 0. Solve the two equations, subtract the 4, subtract the 3. Therefore, it's a set containing -4 and -3. Those are my two solutions to this problem. It's a quadratic. It has up to 2 solutions. Otherwise, it would have the same one that happens twice. So then you just have the one number in there. So that's a really quick, easy way of solving this by factoring. So now, we are going to solve it using the quadratic formula. Exact same problem. In case you don't remember the quadratic formula, the equation is as follows. X equals the opposite of b, plus and minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Again, where a, b, and c are coefficients in the ax squared plus bx plus c equation. It has to be set equal to 0, however, in order to use the quadratic formula. And you need to be careful with this. Please, when you're doing it, don't use your calculator. Okay, when you use the quadratic formula, unless you really have large numbers to use, you're most likely to make a mistake there. So now, I'm going to solve this problem using the quadratic formula. So my leading coefficient is 1, so a is 1, b is 7, c is 12. So x equals opposite of b, so -7, plus and minus the square root of b squared, 49, minus 4 times a, 1, times c, 12, all over 2 times a, 1. Okay, so it's the opposite of 7, or -7, plus and minus the square root. So this is 49 minus 48. That makes it nicer. All over 2. So x equals -7 plus and minus 1. Square root of 1 is 1. All over 2. So x equals -7 plus 1 over 2. And x equals -7 minus 1 over 2. So -7 plus 1 is -6 divided by 2. So x is 3. -7 minus 1, -8. -4. -3 and -4. Set, because we're solving. I don't know. Which way do you want to do it? Factoring or quadratic formula? I'd much rather do factoring, as long as you can go through and factor it. Quadratic formula, you start to get much bigger numbers, and you have to be really careful along the way not to make little mistakes. Whereas, because we're going to factor so much, factoring should become second nature to you, and hopefully that is going to be your go-to process for these. After you go through the factoring piece, or you try to factor it, maybe you do have to go through the quadratic formula, or maybe you just can't figure out what two numbers give you that product and sum. You always have the quadratic formula to fall back on. It always works. So here's one more. I'm going to have you solve this. Practice it with factoring, just to give yourself that extra little reassurance. So take a moment, do that. So this might be one of those cases where finding the product of 24 is a little bit more difficult, getting that negative 24, getting that sum to be a positive 10. So you may want to list out your factors. 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6, and then 5, I'm done. My product's negative, so I know one of them has to be negative. My sum is positive, which means the smaller number is the one that has to be negative. So now add them up, which two works? These two work. Because I have a leading coefficient of 1, I don't have to go through the whole splitting the middle term process. My factors are x minus 2, x plus 12. The product and sum piece gives you factors. Now you go through and set each factor equal to 0. Be careful with that. Please don't just think negative 2 and 12 are your answers, because your negativity will be wrong always. And there you go. So again, going through it, factoring, very, very straightforward. Set those factors equal. They're binomials that'll be set equal to 0, and you'll have your solution.